Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelsen, professional horse trainer, and with me again is my good friend, Debbie Romero, certified Alexander Technique instructor. So today's topic is a little bit of a pickup where we left off on last week, which was last week we talked about the internal world versus the external world, separating those two experiences that we have as humans and our horses have, really. And so what came up that sort of started this topic of conversation is the topic this week is we didn't really pick the words for it, but essentially it came up from a friend of yours who said,
Mhm.
we learn to feel what our trainers tell us to feel.
I
Or
know.
how did she
That
put
was like
that?
bam.
Yeah, so how did that come up and how was she expressing that?
She she was just having difficulty understanding language and what was, and then she just said, "Well, we just learn to feel what our trainers tell us to." And I went, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that is an amazing topic right there."
That's a huge insight that,
Yeah.
and it comes back to what we were talking about with the internal world and the external world.
Hmm.
And I found the same thing that a lot of times in riding instruction, I was told what I should feel, and I was sort of searching.
Yeah.
And the
Like, I'm not
problem,
feeling that. There's something wrong with me.
yeah, or I don't, what I hear all the time from riders is, I don't have enough feel. I just don't feel
Oh,
things that I'm told to feel. And so
wow.
in a way, it's like it shuts down our ability to receive the kinesthetic information from the horse, the changes of forces and direction that are directly related to how the horse is moving.
Yeah, and it physically, that's exactly what happens. If we're tensing a muscle, then all the proprioceptors from that muscle are shut off. You can't talk to the brain if you're tensing or contracting a muscle.
Right. Or the way it was explained to me by one of my mentors was we create an internal loop, like we put our
Mm,
habit on replay as if it were a song,
mhm.
and we're just repeating and replaying that same song. So we're not open to a new song. We're not open to the new frequency or direction of force. So every single time we have a mechanical change in the body, biomechanics is this big buzzword,
Mm.
but what we experience as riders with a change of biomechanics is a change of force. A change, and by force, I mean the amount of um, pressure we feel, tone,
Okay.
tension, or
Hmm.
the way the horse unseats us, or rattles us, or shakes us, or makes it difficult for us to keep our seat still or our seat level. All of those, because force has a very bad word in the horse industry. But when it comes, I'm talking
That's
about,
true.
not forcing a horse to do something, but force as something we feel, that we experience forces of motion acting against our body.
Yes.
And every change in the forces of motion tells us what's going on mechanically in the body. So,
Yep. And sometimes we're open to receiving that information, and sometimes we're not.
yeah, and I think if we're searching for somebody else's experience,
Mm,
we can't
yeah.
find our own.
Or we can't certainly can't hear the horses.
Well, and that's what I mean. We all interpret in our own unique way what we're sensing.
Yes.
And that's true whether it's auditory, visual, taste, smell, and touch is one of our senses. So how we interpret what we're sensing through touch is unique to each
Hmm.
individual. And that's what really struck me about that comment was, so the instructor with the best of intentions is saying, this is what you should feel, or you're looking for this this sensation on your inner calf or in your hands or under your seat, right? And our brains automatically go to seek
Yes.
what we're instructed to seek.
Yes.
And I think,
I remember as a kid when I was a hunter jumper rider and I used to really arch my low back. And the instructor would say, "Can't you feel your seat bones on the saddle?" And there was no way I could possibly feel that because my seat bones weren't even close to the saddle.
right, they were pointed backwards.
Yeah. And I was like, no, I
Yeah,
can't feel that.
yes. Yeah, and then exactly your experience is what I find, that the rider starts to think something's wrong with them, or
Yeah.
that they don't know, or that they're not good at riding, or that somehow something is missing because they can't feel what's being described.
Yeah.
And
I lack something.
I lack, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I lack something because I can't feel what you feel.
What I'm told to feel. Yeah.
Yeah, which becomes this is the right thing I should feel or the
Yes.
wrong thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I found um I did the same thing as an instructor in trying to communicate, because it's tough when we're in the realm of the sense of touch. Everybody's experiencing it differently. And as an instructor, you're trying to get across a message through your own experience and sort of
Right.
seeing, can the rider follow my experience of what I feel when I ride? And then it can feel frustrating if the rider says, no, I don't feel, or, you know, what you said. What seat bones? What seat bones?
What I don't know where
I
they
have
are.
I have no
Why don't I
idea.
feel my seat bone?
Yeah. But if we're authentically there to help a rider develop, what I found as an instructor was I have to change my vocabulary. And the one phrase that I found helped most riders across the board was just asking the question, what do you feel?
Yeah,
What do you feel? Because we all feel something, right?
exactly.
And that started to help people relax the tension, because it's very hard to feel something when you're on that internal playlist of your own habits.
Hmm.
So I realized, how do I break that internal loop,
Right.
right? And one of the things I would do that people can do for themselves is I go, what do your fingers feel like when you reach forward and touch the horse's mane or stroke the neck? How do you know the texture of the hair, right? Because we can feel that.
Right.
And I go, if you know the difference, if your shower is too hot or too cold, you have plenty of feel to get the information you need from a horse.
Oh,
Like,
that's a good way to put it.
of course we have feel. We all have feel. We know if the stove is hot, if the stove is cold. We know if our soup is too hot or too cold, right? We know
I,
if our shower is a little too hot, a little too cold. We want that perfect temperature.
I think at least I was taught way back when that, it had to be all of this efforting and use of muscles and you're just talking about something that's very light.
It's innate.
Yeah, and it's not a concrete thing like left and right, but it's a sense that we don't use very much anymore. We've
Yeah. And so
we go out of the realm of becoming very visual, and that we use that sense more than our kinesthetic sense of feel.
that's exactly what I was thinking. And
Yeah,
what we talked about last time, that if we're trying to ride, putting our body in a picture of a good rider, right? That's what you were doing, overarching your low back,
Hmm.
going, I need to be in the frame of a hunter rider.
Yeah.
Heels down, arch your back, shoulders back, which arches your back, um, up out of your stirrups, lighten your seat, steady your hands. All of those things create a visual image that our brain is trying to push our body into this visual image. And that is going to take us away from the moment to moment experience of what we feel.
Right.
And I go, our body intelligence is amazing. How fast do we know by just sticking a fingertip or a toe in a swimming pool, whether or not we want to get in? Do you
That's
know
a
what
good
I
point.
mean?
And
It's
that's cool because that's different for everybody. Like I'm happy to get in a cold lake and swim, but there's plenty of people that aren't going to do it.
not me. Not me. I go, it's like, no, the water has to feel like warm to me, even on a hot day. Like I go, I just don't like cold water. So I go, I know the second that water is too cold for me, right? Where
It-
you might really enjoy the cool water and you go, that's the perfect temperature for me.
yeah.
That's how unique it is. And so when we're listening to a riding instructor, like I learned over time to take what I was being told and find my own way into what I felt. And then the instructor would say yes or no. And that actually gave me more value out of having a riding instructor or eyes on the ground because I was taking in the words, but I wasn't trying to interpret the words. I was trying to interpret a feel, an internal experience.
Hmm.
And once I started doing that, it became very valuable because even if the writer said, the instructor said, sit deeper. Okay, most of us would respond by squashing down on our glutes,
Mm.
right? And I would take that instruction and sort of explore, sit deeper. Do I feel that in my back? Do I need to lengthen my legs? Is it somewhere around my hip joint? Is it somewhere around my hip rotators? Like I would explore the muscle use kind of from head to toe. And when I nailed it, the instructor would say, yes, that's it. He could see it, but my experience had nothing to do with his instruction.
And
Oftentimes.
we never allow ourselves to ask a question of the instructor. What do you mean by
Yeah.
that? I have no idea what that means.
Yeah. We're afraid to say, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Right. And actually, when a student tells me, I have no idea what you're talking about, I don't get it, that helps me tremendously as an instructor to find a different vocabulary, to
Yes.
find another way in to go, okay, let's start with what do you feel or what do you notice the most?
Yeah.
And what's been so interesting about that question, this just fascinates me, is our body intelligence. And that's the toe in the swimming pool,
Yeah.
right? That goes to our brain faster than the speed of thought. I
It
go, our
does.
body knows immediately if that pool is too hot, too cold, not the right temperature for us right this moment. And that's what I call our body intelligence. And when I ask the question, what do you feel of myself or a student? What bubbles up into our brains as the very first thought? I go, it doesn't matter what you say. Whatever bubbled up into our awareness is the most important thing because it's our body telling us something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can compare it to the horses too, that are we allowing them to have that same experience, or are we shutting that off for them also? Because, like all the previous podcasts, heels down, shoulders back, those are all things that we do, but they're not expressions or feelings.
Yes. And just like working with another human being, each horse's internal experience, whether they like it or not, is so unique.
Yes.
It's completely unique to the horse. And I would say across the board in the horse industry, we've graduated from having this visual picture for the most part of putting a horse in a frame.
Right.
I go, it still exists, but there's a growing percentage of people that are more interested in the functionality of biomechanics than they are in the appearance of the horse's frame. Right. So I go, that's a big graduation of the industry to think differently about what's the function versus what's the picture.
Right.
Right. But I find a lot of people who specialize in biomechanics or who are working on biomechanics are still doing what I call manipulating body parts. Like sort of, I have to move this bone here, or I have to move that bone there, or I have to get the leg to articulate more through flexion and extension. And so there's a deeper understanding of mechanics, but our way of working with the body has not advanced along with it.
Yes.
So we're trying to say, okay, we have this theoretical ideal of perfect mechanics in the horse. So let's use leverage and force and heavy aids to sort of jostle those bones around until they're in the right place.
Yeah.
Do you find that?
It still goes back to the heels down, shoulders back. It's all the same. It's like this rote way of getting there, but we're not getting there that way.
Because I think it's impossible.
Yeah.
It's like the deeper and deeper I dove into biomechanics, which is part of the reason we started this podcast, was looking at research papers,
Yeah.
looking at information that's out there to deepen our understanding of the horse's anatomy, movement, all of that. It's so complex. The deeper you go, the more intricate it becomes. And at a certain point, you realize, or we all realize, there's no way we're going to put this together through a manipulation of the body. Like,
Right.
there's
Like,
no way. And
uh,
if the horse doesn't like the feel, then what they do is protect themselves in dysfunctional ways. So, a lot of times, as we're trying to go towards the goal of mechanical perfection, the horse is not on board because the horse is feeling challenges or changes along the way. And they just are super clever at protecting what they know. Or they go, are you happy with this? Are you happy with that?
yeah.
And as soon as the rider is happy, it may not be correct mechanics, but
Right.
it sort of looks like correct mechanics or sort of feels better. And so we can create dysfunctional patterns at a more and more complex level.
Yes.
And I go, that scared the crap out of me because I was like, wow, how on earth are we going to guide a horse towards actual correct mechanics?
Good question. Especially if our timing and feel is not on board.
Right. And for me, working with the Alexander technique kind of gave me the insight.
Ah,
So in Alexander technique, talk about that for a second because it's not a chiropractic adjustment, but people can adjust chiropractically through the work.
that's scary, huh?
Yeah, and I find the same thing with riding. So what is it that Alexander technique does? Because you're not teaching a position, you're not manipulating the
Mhm.
mechanics, but people are guided towards better mechanical use of their body. So how do you achieve that through AT work?
Um, it's always a good question. Constantly looking. And so for me, it's, can I stay in my length and my width and still do an activity? And I taught yesterday, I a little workshop at a barn, and so when I'm putting hands on people, I am actually working on myself, and that kind of, that timing and feel transfers to the person I'm putting hands on. So I don't know how
The
else to explain it.
information. Yeah,
Yeah, it's information about my use. It's not about fixing somebody. It's
right. You're not
about,
telling them what to feel.
no, no,
Right.
I'm just saying, could we get to a better place of use? Here's how I'm using myself, my experience, and they can take it or leave it, or their experience with my use is, there was 4 people there. Everybody had changes, but they were all different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't, um, we're gonna lengthen your legs or whatever. There was no,
We're
it
going to
was how,
engage your psoas.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to work the psoas today. And it's like, yeah, so everybody has a different interpretation, a different picture immediately if you say we're going to work the psoas.
And everybody came away with something different. One person said, I thought I was the most relaxed person in this group, and it turns out she was really inwardly holding a lot of tension. So it was, and it's interesting what other people see. They see changes, and they're not expecting that. So it's very interesting how it works. It's just, how do I help somebody find their best use at that moment? And it's, I imagine it's just like the horses, it's constantly changing. So
And so, how do you help somebody find their best use through your hands without verbal instruction and without a manipulation of the body? Like, that's why AT work is so hard to explain.
exactly.
It looks like nothing, but it sort of transforms how people are using
Yeah.
themselves. And so,
And
how do you do that?
I see it with horses too. It's just, I'm using myself. I am always working on my best use. I can't
Yes,
I can't help somebody if I'm not using myself well.
bingo.
Yeah,
And
if
that
I'm not in
was
good use, that I am not going to be able to help somebody. So, like I told the riders yesterday, I said, this is really, I'm getting 4 different Alexander lessons myself, because I experience more and more better use the more I put hands on people.
yeah. And that transference of information is through the sense of touch.
Yes.
So it's literally when you say hands on, I like that term because it literally is sort of a lane of hands without a direction from your hands. You're not moving a shoulder or moving bones or placing the hips or moving a leg. You're literally putting your hands on somebody and communicating the use of your body into their body. It's a nonverbal communication through the sense of touch.
Yeah, and that really brings up that we are way too loud in our conversation with our horses. I mean, they get it down to that level too, I think.
Horses have a skin sensitivity, their sense of touch, and I think we went over this research paper, the Umwelt paper,
We
that
did.
the sense of touch, particularly around their barrel, where we sit and where we place our legs, has a higher level of sensitivity than we could measure with our human tools because it was more than the human fingertip.
Wow.
And I go, so of course they feel everything we do with our body. Of course they do, because, and that metaphor of a horse can feel a fly land anywhere on
Mm.
their body and it can drive them crazy, right? So that sensitivity is often pointed out, But when we're riding and we think we need to like slam them with our legs to go forward, that can almost overwhelm the sensitivity in the horse and they'll shut it off.
Yeah.
They'll just shut down because excessive amount of pressure or force can just overwhelm their nervous system.
Yep.
So like I kind of imagine them with their hooves over their ears going la 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 la. I'm not listening anymore. You're too loud. Right?
Yeah.
So that transference of information from your hands to a human, I realized in doing the Alexander technique work myself that there was information given to me that I never would have found inside my own loop in this lifetime. Like I go, it just wasn't in my own internal experience. So you or other AT instructors putting hands on me, I was like, whoa, this is new information for my nervous system. This is new information about how to use my body. And that gave me a huge epiphany about horses and riders because I go, the rider is sort of like the AT instructor. So
Hmm.
the better I use myself as a rider, which is a feel and an internal organization and not specific.
No.
It's not like I engage my core by lengthening my psoas or I put my heels down or because the more advanced version of riding instruction is still telling people what to feel.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Rather than it's a graduation from heels down, shoulders back, keep your hands still, but it's still trying to instruct people your pelvis goes here, right?
That it's a location, that it's a
That
place,
Yeah, or it's a
right?
physical manipulation of your own body to keep your pelvis here, right? And like we need to move through that to get into a sensory experience.
Hmm.
Because really, to move in time with a horse and to communicate with a horse non-verbally through the sense of touch actually happens faster than the human speed of thought.
Yep.
So at a certain, just like, putting your toe in the swimming pool, it's like that's faster. We realize a split second later that it was too hot, too cold, or just right,
Right.
right? But it's like our body tells us that, our brain doesn't tell us that.
Right.
Right. And that's what true communication and elite riding or professional riding, everybody has to shift to this, what feels like intuition, what feels like so fast that you're responding faster than your brain can process.
Yeah. And if we're in any level of contraction or tension, you're not going to hear it. You're,
Or
it's
the
just
more
not.
we try to
Yes.
seek, if we're seeking what the instructor is describing, we don't get that internal experience.
No,
We
it
don't.
goes back to our last podcast of the internal, external. Like, yeah, we focus on places and not just internally being present.
Right. No, and to me, writing would be similar to, like I described, the Alexander technique, where it's a transference of information without a strong direction, without any manipulation,
Right.
right? And the same thing occurs when we dance with a partner. There's the
Mm.
lead and the follower, right? So the man is usually the lead of the dance and the woman is the follower. And I, like, especially women who have ever danced with a partner, I go, how long does it take you to know that man cannot dance? I go, like that fast. Like, and if the guy can dance as the horse in the equation, we feel that sort of gentle guidance or strong but flexible framework. And suddenly we know where to put our feet. We know we can follow the dance,
Mm.
right? And that's what the rider is doing, guiding the horse, is just the lead of the dance. But I've danced with partners who drive me around like a truck. I've danced with partners who are confusing, who are stepping on me. I can't follow. And I've been lucky to dance with like dancing instructors. And I go, I had no idea what I was doing, but it felt fabulous.
Yeah.
And I was just in the right place at the right time, right? So,
That's how I want my horses to feel when I ride, is that this is fabulous.
yes, yes. And as a dancer, I still had to learn my part of the dance,
Hmm.
but a good lead helped me achieve that through feel,
Hmm.
moment to moment, instantaneously, and by the way, in time with music. I go, that's a real skill, right? And it's the
Yes.
same skill of a horse and rider. Or people who tell me I can't feel anything, a lot of times I'll either say, well, do you know if your shower is too hot or too cold? You have plenty of feel, right? Or when in business seminars, there were maybe pre-COVID whole seminars on the quality of your handshake,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
What you're communicating through your handshake, especially for salespeople or business people. And it's like the traditional shaking of hands when we meet somebody, we are downloading our impression of that person really quickly, right?
And we talk about this as talked about it in Alexander School, and I also being a massage therapist, there's this um, rub, I want to call it, before you shake hands or before you touch of not knowing. But there's something about when you put hands on or you shake somebody's hand, there's knowledge being shared.
Information
Yeah,
and
very
rapid.
quickly, very
Yes.
quickly through that feel.
Yeah. And
And
so a lot of times, if we shake somebody's hand, we kind of have a knowing instantaneously whether we like it or not, right? But
mhm,
then our brain takes a second to kind of catch up or come up with a reason, right?
yeah.
It's
And
like,
and it's lightning fast. I mean, it's
yes.
goes it's amazing to me the information we get just from shaking hands or say me putting hands on somebody and
Or
just listening.
the second I'm in the saddle,
Yeah.
the second I'm in the saddle, I know something about that horse,
Yep.
right? And it's
It's
like,
that touch. And if we're not open and aware, it's there, but we just don't seek it or share it.
I think we bypass it. We sort
Ah.
of we submerge that information because our conscious awareness is either on the picture
Mhm.
of what we're doing, what we should look like, or where we're going, or we have an agenda. So our brain is a little bit in the future rather than the
Yeah.
moment, or maybe we're coming to getting on the horse with a little bit of a past experience, already thinking we
Mhm.
know what to expect.
Right.
Good or bad, doesn't matter, but we think we know what to
Mhm.
expect. And I go, movement is an instantaneous present experience every stride,
Yeah.
every stride, every half stride, the body is already changing. I go, that's how fast it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when people start to catch up with that conscious awareness of their internal experience is how we figure out how that horse is moving,
Mhm.
right? And every mechanical change in the horse's body generates a specific amount of force in a specific direction. So the forces of motion have specific direction and magnitude, like we talked about
Right.
with Newton's laws of motion. And it's the direction and the magnitude that tell us how the mechanics are working. So we
Yep.
don't necessarily have to alter mechanics. We can guide forces and let the horse alter the mechanics, which I think
Yes.
is sort of what you're doing in AT work.
Write that down.
Well, and you
What?
guys, part of Alexander technique is repeated over and over and over, but it comes like my understanding of it has been like peeling an onion.
Oh
But you
yeah.
always say direct, allow the head to go forward and away, then or the knees. What are the instructions? Are very specific. So it's like allowing the head to go
Move
forward and up,
forward and up,
the back to
lengthen and widen
widen,
the back,
and then the
knees forward
knees.
and away.
Right. So those are very specific directions of force.
Yes.
And I think that's what Matthias Alexander discovered was if I give people a direction to channel forces,
Hmm.
it then affects the mechanics in a more positive way.
Yes. And I think the language, like we've talked about, I feel we're constantly as teachers working on language um, to evolve, to be able to help each individual horse rider combination. Because the language sometimes, like you said, we're trying to teach what we know, but how is that person interpreting the language we're using?
Exactly. But I think when it comes to, how do I want to say, like if you put your hands on me and lifted my skull forward and away, right?
Hmm.
Or what, forward and up, sorry, forward and up. So like if when I first read one of the AT books, I'm going, okay, forward and up. So I'm trying to find that direction with my head, but it at least sent me on a journey of exploration,
Yes.
right? So I went, which version of that forward and up instruction or direction feels good to me, and which one feels like I'm straining or stressing, right?
And I don't think people take the time to be curious and explore. They want to get to the good place. Is this it? Is this right? I hear that a lot.
Right. I also think we still have the belief system that if we're doing it right, we should feel a sense of struggle and hardship.
It's got to be work.
Yeah. And I say out loud a lot during lessons, the whole point of finding better mechanical use of the body is ease,
Yes.
efficiency, comfort. Like that's the whole point of
Yeah.
improving the mechanics is to find ease, efficiency, and comfort. So I go, if the correct mechanics are creating defensive responses in my horse or struggle, I go, maybe I'm not on the right track,
Hmm.
right? And that really guided the unique training of each horse. And what we expect is we go, okay, change is hard. We're going to use new muscles. So the horse is going to complain. And I go, yeah, that's true because we're in exploration mode. So there'll be a little bit of whinging, fine, no big deal, but not a level of defensiveness where I'm having to resort to leverage
Right.
or to the point that I'm feeling frustrated or angry with my horse. It's like those things now alert me that I'm not helping my horse alter the mechanics authentically in a better use.
Right. But if we're not open to that feel, we don't have a conversation.
Or the feedback.
Yeah. Or the
Like it,
feedback gets really big and then we may say, "Oh, I need to question what I'm doing." I think we did that in a podcast, like knowing before what happens happens. Because if we're shut down and just focusing on heels down, shoulders back, we can't hear. There's no conversation between the horse and rider.
well, the language the language out there between horse and rider, I have to say, one of the hardest things for people to do is look at unwanted behavior that their horse is expressing and not label it or isolate it as a mental emotional issue, that it's a
Mm,
behavioral, isolated behavioral issue. I don't believe that the behavior is ever isolated from the mechanical use of the body.
right.
To me, those two things are intimately intertwined. And especially because our horses can't tell us in language what's going on inside their skin, inside their internal experience. They guide us through their behavior,
Right.
how they're feeling, whether they like something or don't, whether the pool is too hot or too cold,
Yep.
right?
And that's they don't talk. So their language is touch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or body language and behavior. So I go, the behavior is the expression of feeling unsafe or uncomfortable to some degree. Now, I go, some horses are a little bit of a princess in the pea. I go, a mild amount of discomfort is the end of the world for some
Yes.
sensitive horses. I can't cope with it, right?
Yeah.
Where other horses are more stoic, and it's going to be a pretty significant pain issue before you get any negative behavior. So that again is so unique to the individual, but we can look at the behavior not as my horse is being naughty. Like,
Mhm.
why? Did your horse just wake up this morning and decide 10 different ways to give you trouble?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
I think they don't have that strong of an imagination,
Yeah.
right? They either like something or they don't like something. It's pretty black and white, and it's very much in the moment. They may come with some past baggage, but they're willing to change in a moment. If they have a different experience with the same trigger, they change.
Yeah.
So all behavior to me is always tied into first, I have to reduce fear. Like if you're not getting through the fear threshold, there's no way that you can truly, authentically address mechanical issues because that information that the body is giving us about the mechanics, in order to really change a habit, which movement is just a habit in the nervous system, a habitual coordination, it takes conscious awareness
Yes. You
on
have
our
to bring
part.
it to the consciousness.
And I go, how well do you shake hands with people if you're afraid of them? That tension is instantly communicated,
Yeah.
right?
And you can see it in the body language from head to toe usually too. So,
Or how well could you dance if you're afraid of your partner?
right.
Not going to happen. So, eliminating the fear factor and building trust between the partners is a high priority for me because you can manipulate the skeleton till the cows come home,
Hmm.
and it's still going to be crap movement. It's still going to be dysfunctional because there's no way you can put fear in the mix and have authentically correct mechanical movement.
Right.
I go, it's not possible. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is if we like, I guess we do it to humans because the instructor is instructing the rider to feel what they feel. And I think that's also the rider is trying to get the horse to feel what they want to feel. And I go, neither one works very well because the experience of feel is unique to the individual.
Right.
So we have to think as riders the same thing. Our horse's behavior is giving us a little bit of feedback. Are they telling us
Right.
no? Are they telling us yes? Are they telling us I'm working on it, but this is difficult for me? No, I won't even try, right? Why don't you get off now?
Yeah.
Right? They tell us all kinds of things if we start listening. And it's
Yeah.
so funny. Like my little mare started this years ago. If I was losing my stability as a rider, she would just stop and she'd lose forward. And I thought at first, why are you losing forward? And then the next human thought is, oh, you're so lazy, right? You're
Oh,
not
yeah.
trying, right? But she had this way of sort of turning her head and looking at me like, get your act together up there. And I realized the better I got at stabilizing my body, the forwardness wasn't an issue,
Right.
right? But it could have easily gone down the path of just driving and kicking and pushing, except I
Hmm.
knew my horse was smarter than me. So I started listening to her because she's very clever. And I go, if I want to improve my riding, I could really use some feedback. If I don't have an instructor, at least I have my horse.
Yes.
And boy, was she abundant with her feedback. It
Some
was like,
are.
yeah, once I started to give her permission to give me her opinion, she had lots of opinions, lots of opinions. And she really trained me to ride better when I started
Yeah.
listening.
I have one like that too.
I think that's why some people don't like mares. They
Th-
really let you know.
They do.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. There is a difference.
yeah.
Eh,
So we better wrap it up. But this whole conversation sort of started with what your friend said, that we are busy trying to learn what our instructors are telling us we're supposed to feel.
mhm.
And what I did privately in my own head was I would ask questions of my instructor, but as I'm trying to follow the instruction, I wasn't trying to follow the verbal interpretation,
Mm,
right? And that's something with any instructor as riders we can do in the privacy of our internal world.
yes.
We can explore beyond the instruction. And when we feel it and the instructor says yes, because the instructor is there to help us,
Right.
they're not trying to make us ride badly, right? And so when we nail it, our internal experience, we can give that a name. And maybe that name isn't even close to the verbal instruction we got
Right.
from our instructor, right? But
Yeah,
we will learn to ride better either way. And I
that's
think
true.
trying to follow the verbal instruction doesn't always lead to riding better.
Yeah,
Even
we
though
have,
our instructor has the best of intentions, it just doesn't always translate.
I agree.
We'll wrap it up there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us for another Horse Geeks podcast. And please like, share, subscribe, comment. We love hearing from you.
Yes.
And we will see you next time on the next podcast.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.